This is the story of how one couple, faced with difficult challenges, finds themselves at a crossroads where every decision could be a decisive one. Will love be able to prevail? Or will they have to make the hardest choice of their lives, divorce before it's too late? It was late evening. Spouses Shorokov gathered for dinner, but none of them had touched the food, which gave off an incredibly pleasant aroma. Both Vlad and Darina at this moment were full of torment. Each of them wanted to break the important news, however, neither of them dared to start first. I must say it, otherwise I'm not a man. Vladislav was conducting an inner monologue. Just 2 words. I must tell, it is no longer possible to hide anymore. Mentally, muttered Darina. When the spouses finally made up their minds, their words sounded synchronized, though they had completely different meanings. I'm pregnant, his wife said. I want a divorce, Vladislav said. For several minutes they monitored each other with their eyes, trying to realize what they had heard. What? Sorry? Darina was the first to come to her senses. The words about divorce immediately supplanted all the worries about pregnancy, because she could not even imagine that her husband could think about such a thing. Nothing. Vlad immediately shook his head. It doesn't matter. Your news changes everything, he added, coughing. What's the due date? Darina took a deep breath, instinctively covering her stomach. She would definitely ask him her questions again. 3 months, her spouse lowered her head. Since she herself was slender, and recently she wore baggy clothes, the interesting position was carefully hidden, not only from the public, but also from her husband. Vladislav opened his eyes wide. And you tell me about it only now? He asked with a clear reproach, folding his hands on his chest. I know that you do not need this child, bitterly grinned wife. I have long thought how I should do with him. I even made an appointment for an abortion, but I couldn't go. I didn't have the strength. That was the truth. Vladislav was a careerist to the bone, and therefore even before the wedding warned Darina that he was not going to become a father. It was 7 years ago. And then the girl was fine with everything, because she also never dreamed of motherhood. However, with age, everything began to change, and Shorokova more and more often caught herself thinking that she was looking at other people's children and imagining what their offspring with her husband would be like. Vlad lowered his head, burying his hands in his hair. His spouse's words were making things too complicated. He didn't want children, but he couldn't abandon a pregnant woman either. He valued his reputation, and he didn't want to be reviled by everyone around him. Perhaps if she had had an abortion, things would have been a lot easier, Vlad thought, but said something completely different out loud. It's a good thing she didn't go, he said absent-mindedly. Darina looked at him with disbelief. Why do you want to divorce me? Now it was her turn to ask. Her husband was in no hurry to answer. It was difficult for him to admit that at work he met another woman with whom he fell in love without memory. Her name was Olga, and she was the complete opposite of his wife. Very willful and impulsive, Olga whirled into their office and immediately attracted the attention of the entire legal department, which was headed by Vladislav. And he too was no exception. Their relationship developed in the genre from hate to love, giving Shorokov's life the spice that he had long since lost in his relationship with his wife. After meeting Olya, it seemed to him that he and Darina had never had any passion in their marriage. Everything was based on sympathy, which had dulled over the years, and mutual respect. The man was in no hurry to cross the line. So far, they were limited to flirtation and rare meetings outside of work. Olga made it clear that until Vlad will not divorce, she will not let him closer. And then he decided to take this step, although not immediately. We are very distant from each other, began with a cliched phrase. Spouse, I thought that our marriage has already outlived itself, and now only burdens us both. It all sounded so ridiculous that the spouse grimaced. Maybe you should admit that you have a lover, Darina said caustically, realizing how empty his words were. I have no one, Vlad sighed, and it was partly true. They talked for a long time, trying to figure out how to move on. Vladislav was determined to keep his family for the sake of a child, which he never wanted. The position in society and the notion of rightness and honor were more important to him than the lowest desires, and therefore he tried to suppress his feelings for Olga and do everything to keep his marriage with Darina. The girl had mixed feelings. On the one hand, she understood perfectly well that she and her husband were already strangers to each other, but at the same time, she did not want to become a single mother either. When the baby is born, I'll be even more miserable. There is nothing worse than to be with a man who lives with you out of a sense of duty, said the inner voice, which Darina diligently silenced. So, they made an appointment with a family psychologist. For several months, the couple faithfully attended all meetings, did exercises, tried to spend weekends together. Vladislav turned into an exemplary spouse who surrounded his pregnant wife with care. Darina tried to be more gentle and malleable. She went out with her husband in public and accepted congratulations in connection with the expectation of a new member of the family. Shorokov worked in a large company, where he held one of the highest positions. This role, in addition to professional qualities, required an impeccable reputation. So, he tried to demonstrate that he was not only a smart lawyer, one of the key figures in the business, but also an exemplary family man. When the couple appeared together at the corporate party, Olga did not stop throwing eloquent glances in their direction. But she had nothing to show, because Shorokov did not have time to confess his feelings or make any unsubstantiated proposals. Darina was quick to pick up on these signals. She furtively glanced at her husband, who tried not to notice his colleague. Everything was obvious. Nevertheless, they did not give themselves away by anything but looks. Shorokov stayed by his wife's side all the evening, holding her gently by the waist. Already in the cab, they had a conversation. "You love her?" did not ask, but asserted his wife. Vlad kept silent, turning away to the window. "That look," Darina continued, "once upon a time you looked at me like that. I remember it very well." "Why do you start?" began to irritate the man. "We decided to save our marriage for the sake of our future child." The girl burst out laughing, which made even the driver uncomfortable. "Vlad, I have to give birth in 3 months, and you still do not know the sex of our child," said Darina, shaking her head. "What else is there to talk about?" Vladislav turned a surprised look at his wife, and he really did not even think about it. A child and a child, but he never even thought about what he would be when he was born. It was unthinkable. "Who are we going to have?" he asked quietly. "A boy," Darina answered on automatic, looking at her hands. When the child was born, the girl was transformed. In her awoke such tenderness and love that even her look softened, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. Until that day, Darina did not even know that someone could be loved so much without expecting anything in return. Vlad was close by. When he showed up at the discharge, his spouse was able to look at him with different eyes. He had changed in the last 3 months. Something seemed to have faded in him, and even though from the outside he looked like a happy young father, his wife knew that in his soul every day there is a violent storm. She was able to study the man well for so many years of life together. It was worth Vlad's first time to take his son in his arms as Darina smiled warmly. "Let's get a divorce?" Still with the same smile, she said. The husband incomprehensibly brought his eyebrows together on the bridge of his nose. Slightly rocking, he returned the boy to the crib and then approached his wife. "What?" was all he could manage to say. "I love our son," Darina said with incredible tenderness in her voice, "and therefore I do not want him to live in a family where mom and dad are unhappy." "Darren, I'm trying," Vlad grumbled. "And I can see that," the girl nodded. "But I can also see how you're suffering. I don't hold a grudge against you, really. I realize now, too, that our marriage has outlived its usefulness. You know, I used to think that I needed a husband, status, and other things to be happy, but now I realize how wrong I was. Why don't we just let each other go?" And they let go, deciding to go their separate ways. Vlad and Darina parted on a peaceful note. Neither of them considered the years lived together a mistake. On the contrary, they treated their marriage with respect, especially thanks to the baby. They were now bound for life. The divorce episode seriously damaged the man's reputation at work. He even had problems with the boss, for whom family values were paramount. But after a while, everything shook out. Far from immediately, but Vlad managed to build a relationship with Olga. Now he could openly love her, and their feelings strengthened every day. Darina was raising a son, whom they decided to name Oleg. Contrary to her words, she did not feel like a single mother, because she could ask her former spouse for help at any time. The role of a mother suited her very well, so she was happy to take care of the child. Little Oleg lived in unconditional love, even though his parents were divorced. And the whole point is that they lived a happy life, which they gave to their son,